Welcome to The Lost Signals discusses film and TV. Using the revolutionary Manzar-Amosi Thurlow scale,
or MONS,
we scrupulously review these art forms with an emphasis on narrative structure. Join us for another entertaining episode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Lost Signals Reviews, Film and Television. Today we're doing television. Hey,
That's different.
What we normally do. I'm Jonathan Ian Manser, here with Scott Thurlow.
And I would like to cut off my own leg and eat it with a nice, perfect sauce.
Stephen Ramosi.
I would be remiss if I didn't recommend you a good Chianti to go with that.
Mm-hmm.
And Christopher Morgan.
I'm delicious.
You certainly all are. We are doing NBC's and now Netflix's Hannibal TV series.
Mm-hmm.
I am a huge fan of Hannibal, both as a character and a series. And I am delighted that Netflix picked up the series, remastered it to a certain extent, and by God, they better do a season 4.
That's pretty much what we're framing this.
And this is a salute to Hannibal, the TV series, and the character in general.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to, before we begin with kind of an exploration of the series, I wanted to ask each of you what what have you seen in the Lecterverse?
The Harrisverse, if you will.
So Scott, would you like to start?
Yeah, so of course I've seen this. So we, in fact, did Silence of the Lambs, I believe, a year or two ago. I believe it's on the AFI, or we definitely did it for Halloween. So I've seen that. I've seen Red Dragon, and I haven't seen Hannibal Rising, but I think those are the major films that I've seen. And of course, I have to give a shout out to our friend of the show, Rich Perry, who was in fact the one who sort of convinced me to watch Hannibal the series. Mm-hmm. And it was very good. So I may not be as big a fan of it as you, but I'm pretty big fan. I like the character, I like the writing, I like the portrayal, of course, both by Hopkins and by Matt Mickelson, a la Steve-O's picture there in the background. So I think they did a good job with both. And it's funny because I guess before I pass to you guys, I wasn't sure. I was I know it exists. The show was there on NBC, and we'll get into why it may not or didn't work quite within that. That wasn't maybe the right home for the show, right? But either way, it was a really well done plot. I thought a really well done 3 seasons, and I enjoyed what I saw of it. And again, we'll get into more of it. But for what it is, it's fucking solid as hell, and I think they did a good job. All the scripting and the acting and so forth was good. So that was my experience with it, and I think I enjoyed a lot of it, and I'm excited to, if indeed they're going forward with it, which we'll discuss in a second. But if that's the case, then good on them, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, Steve, would you like to go next?
Absolutely. So I've seen it. I've seen it all. I've read all the books. I've seen all the movies.
Yeah, for real?
Yeah. Thomas Harris does a great job I read Silence of the Lambs first, probably shortly after I saw the movie, and then went on to read all the rest of his stuff because it's just really great. We can perhaps briefly talk about Hannibal Rising and why that came about at some point, and why it wasn't quite as good as all the rest of them. But the
less said, the better.
Regardless, the Silence of the Lambs, Red Dragon, or I guess Red Dragon, Silence of the Lambs, and then Hannibal were all incredible. And even Hannibal Rising, as far as the novel goes, was pretty decent, despite the fact that it wasn't as good as the rest for reasons. And then as far as the movies go, obviously Silence of the Lambs is way up there in the canon of film. Just an incredible movie. But honestly, Manhunter, and then Manhunter I thought was really great. I think it came up before Silence of the Lambs.
It did.
Yeah. And just a good movie. I didn't see it until after I saw Silence of the Lambs, but like that was just a fucking incredible, like awesome movie in and of itself. And then honestly, even Red Dragon, the movie was really good. And
yeah, I think it's solid. I agree.
Hannibal had its own merits and stuff like that. Like, it's hard to touch Silence of the Lambs in terms of film. And that's most of what we talk about. But let's get down to the main event, kind of what we're talking about, which is Hannibal, the TV show. And this show is...
You want to hear what I had my experience with Hannibal was before this?
What?
Yes, I would, Chris.
Sure.
My experience with Hannibal was before this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Please go.
I've seen Silence of the Lambs, Hannibal, and Red Dragon. And I'm not really going to get into all that except to say that I saw Silence of the Lambs a whole bunch, and it's a fine enough film. But this is going to be really short, so we could segue into it, Steve-O. Mads Mikkelsen, I know he had a lot longer. There was more of a time for him to nuance his character, his story. I'm not taking anything away from Anthony Hopkins, but Mads Mikkelsen made him exquisite.
Yeah, that's a good description. Like, I think, like,
that's exactly what Hannibal wants to be, right?
Yeah, you're right. Like, good segue, but just quick, like, we mentioned this, and I'll just sort of coda it in a sense. Anthony Hopkins as Hannibal in Silence is not in it that much.
60 Minutes.
Yeah, everyone remembers his role as that, but like he's not like centrally like featured or focused upon in that film. So,
well, Chris, to build off of what you said, my experience is I've seen all the movies. I've seen everything and read everything aside from Hannibal Rising, because there was a time when we were interested in exploring the nature development of the villains versus the nurture. The nurture development of the villains versus the nature development, and they wanted to give a reason for Hannibal to be the way he is, which I think is unnecessary. But that is what I have to say about Hannibal Rising.
I somewhat agree, because
but you see that with like Halloween and other kind of horror films of trying to explain why they do what they do. However, Sherlock and Hannibal are my two favorite fictional characters in media.
Fictional sociopaths.
Hey.
I guess Hannibal is more of a psychopath, but
brilliant gentleman.
You could argue it.
Dealing with the complex
tomato over here.
So, and I want to say that Brian Cox is my favorite. Actually, I agree with you on the Mads Mikkelsen. But I wanted to go over quickly about the series is really about Will Graham and Hannibal. Will Graham is brought out of academia to become a FBI profiler by Jack Crawford, played
Lawrence Fishburne.
Lawrence Fishburne, in a great job there. And he's introduced to the psychiatrist Hannibal, who's secretly a cannibal. And they develop a really complex emotional relationship, an intimate relationship, as Hannibal attempts to craft Will into his protege and into
mold him
a character that he can reflect himself to. And over the course of 3 seasons, it deals with certain... it goes from Case of the Week to exploring Thomas Harris's books
more in depth,
and it leaves off on a cliffhanger, which hopefully we'll get into more in the season 4. But
cliff jumper into a cliffhanger.
However, I loved Anthony Hopkins growing up, but I actually think that Mads Mikkelsen, because Chris, as you mentioned, had the time to develop this character.
And I think that's a key point. Yeah,
he really added a level of menace but gravitas to the role. And granted, I'm not taking anything away from Anthony Hopkins' portrayal there, but you meet Anthony Hopkins when he's already caught. You see the caged animal. Here you get to see the the debonair, the rises, but the man, the animal with the mask of civility on top of him. And I think that's what makes him such a fascinating character.
But what I love about this series is, and you're right, Anthony Hopkins, this was Hannibal after he was caught and had been in jail. But the thing is, it's just like watching how they develop the character and Mads Mikkelsen's portrayal. You understand why people would be seduced by him. You understand why he's likable. I mean, he's not just a character. He's not just a character of mystery. I mean, he's got a lot of development, and he's still a mystery. I mean, but I understand his character so much better because, you see Hopkins, and like you said, he's done time in jail. There's no way your mind can process what he would have been like. And then you see this, and you're like, wow.
Here's the interesting, I see Anthony Hopkins' portrayal, and it's like he does so much with so little, right? Especially in Silence of the Lambs, like he gets his day in the sun, like Hannibal and all that. But like when you're watching Silence of the Lambs, like you can understand why people would be seduced by him, but that's him like handcuffed, like almost literally handcuffed because he's in jail. In this show, you get to see him in his full glory, right? Like you just see Hannibal in his full glory, and like the understanding of what he is. Like you see that in Silence of the Lambs. Like it's. I actually give Anthony Hopkins immeasurable credit of making Hannibal Lecter in 16 minutes or whatever it is, such a memorable character and such a like intense character. But like you want to know, based off of that, you want to know what he's all about. And this is the show that lets you know what he's all about without like ruining it, right? Like it could be so easy to like fuck that up. But Mads Mikkelsen portrays it so well and it's written so well. The amazing thing about this show to me is that it was on NBC?
Yeah, that's what I was going to...
That it was on NBC. Like, this plays like an HBO show. In fact, the only reason that you can possibly like set them apart is that there's no like heavy cursing and there's no
it's not a problem.
Ridiculous nudity, right? Like the level of detail that goes into every script in this show is not network. Like it doesn't feel like a network show. The level of like violence that happens in the show doesn't feel network. I don't know how they got away with it. It's fucking wild. And like I'll say, like you don't. The only reason I think they got away with it is because it's not really on screen. It's a lot of like after violence, right? Like you see a lot of like bodies after they've been mutilated and things like that. But it's still like wildly graphic. And they pulled this. They convinced a network, like a standard network, to let them do this for 3 years. I don't know how they fucking pulled it off, but it's brilliant.
Well, if I may, the history on it is, first of all, it's developed by Brian Fuller, who is one of the auteurs of the modern Golden Age.
That's what I was going to bring up. Yep, of course.
However, also, it's interesting that NBC initially rejected Mads Mikkelsen as Hannibal. They wanted John Cusack and another actor who unfortunately...
Was it Nicolas Cage or something?
No. It's another kind of somewhat serious... not to say Nicolas Cage isn't a serious actor, but a more serious actor than Nicolas Cage. And once... Brian Fuller kept pushing for Mads Mikkelsen. And once Mads was cast, NBC kind of washed its hands of Hannibal to a certain extent. They had less expectations for it, allowing Fuller to get away with more. They weren't... actually, Fuller blames a little bit of the lack of NBC pushing Hannibal to certain of his faults. But you said, how can they get away with stuff on NBC? It's interesting. You can see the influence of NBC throughout it. One, it's the case of the week to start off with, which is very formulaic to standard television. But then the third season's really he thought that the series would end at the end of every single season.
Mm-hmm.
So, but when he got the third season, I think he saw the end coming. So he went for the first half of the third season very artistic to really try to capture, I think, his messages throughout the entire series. But then in the last half, which was a great job of incorporating Red Dragon, he has a lot of snide remarks for the fact that Red Dragon is
like
more for what NBC wants of us. It's kind of more formulaic. It has a villain that appeals to the fears of the average viewer, of the killer that comes into their homes and kills them. And I want to talk about the artistry of this work a little bit, but since we're on this thing, I actually feel that his portrayal of psychologists is more. And I've read a lot about Hannibal, and this was one of the more interesting things, was that it's using them as critics, and that people didn't understand Fuller's vision, just as they didn't understand Hannibal or Dollarhide's vision, and that when the psychologists were attempting to like fit them into a box, it's not getting the what the art that Fuller was attempting to say.
Yeah.
And I actually can see. Again, this is what critics have said about it, but I can kind of see that in retrospect.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I think that's a good point. Like, in retrospect, but like, I think. Sorry, Steve. I might steal something that you said. Like, we discussed this series off cast, like to an extent, especially leading up to this episode. But like, the thing is, like, it shouldn't, like, its home should never have been NBC. It's very bizarre that it started there and like even had the 3-season run that it had, because, and again, we've used this phrase, we've used this like backhanded compliment that isn't like necessarily what we mean it to be, but it's a lot smarter and clever than it should be, given for where it was, right? Like, if this show like was shown on, like I said, HBO or Showtime, or like some like premium primetime channel such as that, you wouldn't really blink an eye. But the fact that it almost like snuck in under the radar on NBC and wasn't like, it was okay received, like, and its numbers were like, its viewer numbers, that is, were like fine, but like not like crazy, like not hugely like high, right? But because NBC was not necessarily the home it needed to be.
But perhaps it was, because the fact that NBC was hands off of it, because it had no faith. It's really
weird. Like, and especially like
Fuller was given freedom to pursue.
Yeah,
unlike American Gods, where he was forced out.
We all like Fuller like as a show producer, essentially, right? So like, I mean, to me, like personally, it's fascinating the fact that like he's somehow like the show itself like found its home, or at least was initially launched on this network that isn't necessarily known, but via that fact, as you mentioned, like that meant like they were almost doing like case of the week kind of shit, but like elevated because of the acting and the writing and like the casting and so forth, right? So,
I was gonna say I kind of love the fact that it like made it on NBC for 3 seasons, like right, like that tells me that you can figure out a way to get good stuff on network TV. Now, granted, this is not by any means like the standard thing that's going to come out on network, but like, I like that something like this was there and like stuck around for 3 years at least, right? Like, and
sure,
granted, I think that this show could have had a longer run somewhere else, probably. And may well still at this point, which is what we're all hoping for, fingers crossed, for a 4th season. But I think it's really fascinating that it was a network show. And like, I have to feel like, so I didn't watch this when it was out on NBC.
That's what I wanted to ask you guys. Did any of us watch it when it was on NBC?
No.
We did.
But real quick before we move on, because Beth and I were having this conversation the other night. We were talking to some friends of ours, and we were talking about shows that are able to have longevity, or the best shows when you're dealing with network, and to be able to craft standalones that tie into the mythos and the characters. You don't, it is a killer of the week kind of thing, but because they put the characters first and all that first, they can get away with it without it seeming episodic. And that is like a real fucking talent.
It's a hard line to straddle. Yeah, sure.
See, it's interesting looking at this in retrospect, because if you read the reviews at the time, there's a lot of criticism of Hannibal, talking about how, and only if you read retrospect reviews or revisiting of the series, they're much higher. There's much higher praise,
Much higher touted.
So it's not like Hannibal. Like even critics at the time were critical of the series. So it's interesting. I think that it was that NBC allowed that perfect storm for it to work. Although you could say it all like, oh, it'd been great if it's on ABC. The critical response to the first season might have seen it get cut off after the first. Like,
I'm just saying, like, if we're gonna like segue, like my model, like sort of thing is like, I did not. It was not on my radar at all when it was originally airing on NBC. Like I said, it was only, I'll give credit to our friend Rich Perry, who mentioned it to me, like, hey, it's now available. Even before Netflix, it was available maybe on Amazon, Steve-O, one of you, like, someone might remember, a different streaming service after it had been complete of its initial 3 seasons. And I was like, okay, sure, I'll check it out. And, like, yeah, very quickly, I found myself, like, very enthralled with the whole series. And I just fucking crushed it. And then, like, it came up, I believe Netflix picked it up, like, recently enough. And
that's how I watched it.
Yeah, it shot up, and, like, it was in one of their top 10, like, most watched shows when it was available on their service. And I guess we'll get into, like, segue into a possible 4th season. But all I'm saying is, like, yeah, as you all mentioned, it seems like to me it's a strange beast to have lived upon the NBC channel, like, where it was.
but why?
But also, like, I don't know, because
name another show that's been on network that's like anything like this.
I mean, there are those, like, the fact that the Criminal Minds and those kind of
there
things,
are some.
No, I'm not saying that there are, but it's the idea that I could see where, especially in the first season, where they're attempting to adapt the show of the Villain of the Week, it does have there is a genealogy there where I could see where someone would want to adapt this.
Certainly.
Oh, like they're adapting Clarice for ABC or something like that.
Yeah, and that's I guarantee that's not going to be. I mean, I shouldn't say that. Maybe it'll be fucking amazing. But
Guarantee
I doubt it.
But no, I get what you mean. I'm saying it was just, like, just a bit strange to me, just because, like, of where it landed and where, like, it seemed like it could have been. It should have been, in theory, like, on a different channel, etc.
Right, I want to move on to the like ideas and the kind of the themes that run through the show. I want to start off with that it's actually very much steeped in Gothic tradition. You have, and also Thomas Harris's work is as well.
Certainly.
But what I think I love about Hannibal in general is the idea of that kind of Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, and a lot of, like, especially Gothic England storylines are about, like, the werewolf. You have the civility on the front, and then the beast within, and that duality of man, it runs throughout the entire thing. Between Will, Hannibal, Dollarhide. What?
It's the mullet of civility.
Sure.
Civility on the front. Animality on the back.
I got the metaphor too late, unfortunately. But I actually think that you can actually see a lot of Dracula in this, especially with Mads Mikkelsen, where you have the kind of foreign, the charming foreign man who preys upon those within his own society. But I think that one of the reasons this works is it's so steeped in tradition.
I mean, I think I agree. Like, it's a good point that, like, maybe it's not as obvious on the outset or, like, upon a first initial viewing, I suppose. But as we just mentioned, like, in the previous section, like, yeah, in retrospect, like, you can see elements and aspects of that I think clearly Fuller and so forth, like, in the showrunners and the writers drew from. And then, of course, like, the portrayals, as we said, like, also elevate that. But yeah, I think it is steeped in that sort of, like, Gothic, like, sort of, like, dripped in that tradition, if you will. And, like, because the characters, like, in theory, you would think, like, are familiar to modern audiences. Like, for the most part, people know who fucking Hannibal is. They know who Will Graham is, at least to some degree. And so this series took those elements that were like generally familiar, like generally known, but did their own thing with them, and I think elevated them to a degree that garnered a lot of popularity. And we'll get to this maybe in a second as well. But like, just at this point, it's the call for it to come back is pretty big, and I think that's because of the all due credit to the elements that went into making the series itself. So, what do you boys think?
I think it's. I think there's this fascinating thing. Like it's almost throughout the whole series, it's almost like really violent reverse Sherlock Holmes, right? Like it's Sherlock Holmes seen through the eyes of Moriarty, almost, where you get the. I mean, that's the thing. Like you never honestly know who you're seeing this through the eyes of. Is it Will Graham? Is it Hannibal? You get both at certain points, and that's what I really love about this show.
Sure,
it's fucking fascinating to see the ways that it kind of navigates the ways that each of them navigate their own personal. Relationships with everybody else. Like, we haven't even mentioned Lawrence Fishburne yet, who plays Jack Crawford, who's brilliant in this, and Alana, played by Caroline DeVernus, and there's just so many other characters that are great, but like the show always comes back to Hannibal and Will Graham. And they both do such an amazing, like, tightrope act. They have this incredible chemistry that's like honestly, it's Hannibal always loves Will Graham, right? And Will Graham goes back and forth between loving and hating Hannibal. Hannibal has moments where he's willing to lovingly kill Will Graham, like in his own way, like, but he never stops having these like I don't know what the right term is, but like this love for Will. Like, he always has this outreach to him in his own way, and like Hannibal's like kind of this creature that can't be named, or this like has this something about him that can't be like pinned down by modern psychology, right? He's something out of the box. And like, they say that a couple times throughout the course of the series, is like, I don't know what you are. Like, you're something completely different. And Mads Mikkelsen does an incredible job portraying that something completely unknown. Like, it's hard to pin down the way that he feels, because he doesn't really, in terms of this show anyway, he doesn't really feel the way that humans feel, right? Like, he has emotions, he has feelings, but they're different than like standard emotions or feelings, to a certain extent. Like, he has maybe that's not right. He has all the same feelings and emotions that people have, but they go out from him in different ways.
Applies them differently.
Yeah, exactly. They go out into the world in a different way than most people put them out into the world. And it's fascinating to watch. I don't know. I don't have much more to say about that, but...
Chris, before I start rants, do you have anything to say?
I was just going to say that this is a perfect storm of things I love. I love voices with great quality. I love cooking shows. I love processes. I love presentations. And I grew up on a lot of body horror. So when I tell you that I was very captivated, I knew like it's not really, you knew on one level it was humans, but on the other hand, it's not. But there's just such an elegance to Hannibal and to the series, to the point where they didn't really show you a lot. But as the series went on, it became more gratuitous. but I didn't realize how squeamish I got until like the second season. I'm like, it's just like, but the everything in this is constructed. I mean, Hannibal's love of art and his love of the human form, and he's big in this drawing and sculpture. So everything is just like contextually perfect. So I didn't realize like a lot of the body horror that you were hearing secondhand or seeing part of. By the time they had actually started getting gratuitous with it, I had reached my saturation level where like everything was making me squirm. And I'm just going to say the cumulative effect of
suddenly, get you acclimated to that, I guess.
Yeah, but my whole point is the movies, the show's attention to detail, to highlight certain things and misdirect you in certain things, and you're getting a lot more information than you think you're getting.
Art is perhaps one of the most intimate things that's produced by humans because it is, in a way, the purest representation of your worldview and yourself. I have theories that the idea of the observation of art and having someone who understands your art is one of the more important relationships someone can have in the world. And Hannibal is a man who has, and also Francis Dalahadji, as an example, has a way of interacting in the world which is they consider art and proper civility things.
Do what they think is art.
It's the desire to find someone who understands the craft that you're making. And I think that's so there's a lot of talk about the relationship between Will Graham and Hannibal, and I think that it's not love in a sexual way, it's not love in a mating way, it's a love in that Hannibal finds someone
intellectual kind of level.
And not even that, it's an instinctual that a person understands you and that you're comfortable enough to show yourself.
Will's the only one that's on his level, and I feel like that's kind of what they go
major point
hard into the whole series. Like, Will is the only one that can understand Hannibal, and Hannibal's the only one that can understand Will.
Yes, and it's also to the point that almost all the villains are out there are attempting to be understood by their world. Not all of them, but many of them are.
Number of them.
And I think that is also a meta thing to Fuller, who is attempting to create his art and doesn't want to be misunderstood. And that's why I think so many people are drawn, is that Hannibal is showing, yes, in his inhumanity, is also showing one of the basest needs of humans. It is to find someone who you can speak to,
connect
who you can be yourself around, who you don't have to have any
pretenses.
Any of the you don't have to wear the facade. You can be yourself, and that's something a lot of people have in real life are comfortable being. They have to hide information from people, and they found someone in Will that he doesn't have to. And I think that's what it really draws people in.
But I think the fascinating thing about that is, like, even though Hannibal thinks that he's found someone that he can be himself around, he still has to hide himself, because the only person that he can be himself around is the person that's literally hunting him for most of this show. There's this idea of, like, even the person that is closest to you, you can't show your full self to. Mm-hmm. And like that's one of the strengths of this show, is like Hannibal is this like perfect villain to an extent, right? Where he like is so good at not allowing himself to slip, not allowing himself to fall into like making that fatal error with, even though he has grown so close to Will in all these seasons, he realizes the danger to himself, right? Like he realizes, and Will is to the show's credit, Will becomes the exact same way, where Will is like, he wants to allow himself to slip into like his full, like, he's very drawn to darkness, and perhaps at some points even wants to become like the serial killer that Hannibal is, or that he hunts and that he finds. But he realizes that he himself can never allow himself to fully expose any of that to anyone else also.
But and also the draw, I think, is that Will has, until I think the very end, very little agency. He's pulled by Jack, by Alana. He occasionally shows flashes of it, but oftentimes Hannibal is almost the complete opposite. He is complete agency to the point where there's an old aphorism, which is a rising tide
Lifts all boats.
Lifts all boats.
Yeah.
In a sense, Hannibal poisons everyone around him to bring them to his level. You see, everyone's life in this is crippled to a certain extent, whether you're dealing with Shelton, who is constantly tortured, and one of my favorite characters in it. Jack loses everything and just becomes the machine willing to destroy anyone for his goals. Alana loses her... Actually, Alana becomes very masculine throughout it in order to achieve that level but she still can't best Hannibal, and she's fleeing at the end. There's like Hannibal poisons everything around him, but with his sheer will, where Will doesn't have that. So I can see that draw there. That Will wants to have that power Hannibal has.
The thing about the relationship that I find so interesting is that you can imagine a sexual relationship because because they are every relationship in one. I mean, there's the codependence aspect of it. When in a lot of ways, Hannibal, or at least what he represents or his MO, is a narcotic to him. I mean, he's like addicted to it. He will fall off the wagon. I mean, that's pretty evident when nothing's more clear than when Jack pulls him out of retirement. You're right, Ian. He wants an equal, to have somebody who truly understands his art. Will does. I don't think he can process it as well. So the relationship is really, really fascinating, and it opens up a lot of doors, not only for like character and story, but with regard to like just paying closer attention to just interpersonal relationships in general. Their relationship between them, like I said, is most relationships somehow twisted into some...
No, I feel you. I think it's really well described, Chris. And yeah, like I think maybe like we've said this before, just in general, because it's a series and not just a one-off movie. Even like knowing the source material, like that allows them the time and the breathing room and the characters and the actors to, encapsulate all of that and to draw it out and like make it compelling and like believable as hell. Like you understand, as you guys said, why Hannibal is how he is and why he is drawn to Will and vice versa, and like their relationship between themselves and like how toxic it is, but yet they can't escape each other. They almost refuse to negate each other, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's really well done. And like again, just you might not have seen it elsewhere, or like it it's a backhand comment, but it's unexpected for it to be an NBC show in a sense, like in a network show versus like a primetime show. But nevertheless, regardless of that even aspect, it's so well done that it's so fucking compelling, and everything about this show and this series is so perfectly balanced that it's intimately watchable. So yeah.
So does anyone have any other points they want to make? Discussion of any characters or?
I do briefly want to talk about the food of the whole thing.
Okay. Food porn.
Oh my god, so much food porn. This made me want to eat people. Like if you watch this show,
maybe you want to eat people more.
I honestly, I would love to get like.
Cook me some liver.
They should have a cookbook of the recipes, like not people wise.
I'm pretty sure they do.
Like all of these recipes are based on actual recipes of animal parts, not people parts.
Steve-O, I'm pretty sure I saw at work there is a cookbook based on Hannibal, like of course, like not using human parts.
That's awesome because everything looked so amazing. Like all of the scenes where they're showing him cooking, like yeah, Hannibal's a foodie for sure, but like it's there's so much care taken not only in the like shots, how the shots are set up, but like I was reading into it and like all that food was like actually made
legit,
and it was almost all like very legit food. There were like it was very rare that we had to eat something that tasted gross. Like apparently one of them was the the whole bird that they had to eat, I think, in the third season. But like just watching that, I want to eat all of the things that they made in this show because they all look that Hannibal made because they all look amazing and like there's so much care put into the cinematography of it, the like the creating that look of the food and how it's laid out and all that. Like I am in awe of how appetizing this show looks for a show about eating people. It's fucking really impressive. Like, and it's just as like a small part of what's happened in this show that should have never been on NBC. Like that little detail made it so much better, and they do it in almost every episode, and it's just fucking wonderful. It's delightful.
Yeah, okay.
Chris, you have anything? No? Yep. All right. So, as you alluded to a few seconds, about half an hour ago, there is a lot of speculation that there's going to be a fourth season. This is the only show maybe this is on Netflix where they asked me, am I enjoying watching Hannibal? Which makes me think that they're actually running.
Suspicious. Why would they ask you that?
There's a ton of interviews going around. Fuller is totally down with creating more.
Almost the whole cast,
the cast is interested coming back. I even think Gillian Anderson is interested in coming back. I know she's a big. She gets along works with Fuller quite well. I think the only impediment is getting the rights to Sounds of the Lambs.
Yeah,
particularly. But they don't even need that. Like, there's enough interesting characters there that
have to have that. But yeah, I mean, like, yeah, right. Like, it's the final. Like, it's the final thrust is like, yeah, there's a big push when it hit Netflix. It like shot up to like the top one in the top 10 of whenever it was. Like, I don't know, like early this summer or something like that. And yeah, that everyone who's involved in the project expressed interest. Like, we would love to do another season. I think even you said offcast, like Fuller himself or the writers with him had planned out many more seasons.
Yeah, I believe 7 seasons total,
right?
If I remember.
That'd be amazing.
So like, yeah, like again, like while it may not have like been the home it needed to like originally on NBC, like if Netflix picks it up and throws money at it, which they have a lot of money to throw around at this point,
also Netflix remastered it, so I think that the care and attention they're putting into. I believe they lightened it a little bit. They
just made it more profitable, and like you can binge the crap out of it. And so, like, yeah, I mean, of course, I think we are all amongst us very much like 100% behind the fact if they're going to do at least a 4th season, if not more beyond that, with Netflix's blessing / backing as well. And yeah, it seems like the push for that is pretty, in the forefront, and the fans as well are like. We're pushing for it, like, and I think I would certainly love to see it, and hopefully, like, given the fact, like, they've been doing interviews, like Fuller did an interview, like, even Mads and who plays Will Graham? Hugh
Dancy.
Hugh Dancy, yeah, like
Fuller and Hugh Dancy did.
They've all done a number of whatever interview and show they're on, like. Hey, what about the next season, Hannibal? Like, they're like, well, keep an eye out for it, right? Something like that, like, right? Which, of course, all that adds up to heavily imply that they're almost certainly going forward with it, given like the push behind it, and they've got the backing now. They've got the fucking publisher behind them.
And the one thing you don't want is a group of people obsessed with a cannibal, angry at your company.
That's true.
But
they're gonna eat the rich.
well, on that note, I'm Jonathan Ian Manzer, and Hannibal has inspired my culinary tastes. I'm here with Scott Thurlow.
I'm going to cut off my own leg and enjoy it as a meal myself soon.
Stephen Rossi.
Love Hannibal, and may I say, we just found out that Chadwick Boseman died today, so R.I.P. Chadwick Boseman. That really sucks. Have a good night.
And Christopher Morgan.
Nom nom.
About Chadwick Boseman. How awful of you.
No, I was gonna say nom nom like eating. And
Terrible.
Steve
How dare you.
reminded me of that, and I'm like, okay, I'm bummed now. Then.
Now
Have a good night.
you made myself sad. Cheers. See you next time, I suppose.
Editing and engineering by Jonathan Ian Manzer. Music by Christopher Morgan. Check us out on YouTube and iTunes for the shows, and on Facebook and Twitter for updates. Or Mott's?